listener production.
Hi, Natasha Belling with you and welcome to The Briefing. Australia has this year seen one of its worst road tolls on record. New data from the National Road Safety Hub shows 1,340 people died on our roads across the country in the 12 months to July 2025. And since 2021, road deaths have increased more than 20%, with safety experts saying speed, driving under the influence and distractions are the biggest killers. As thousands of drivers take to the roads this holiday period, we are joined by the New South Wales Roads Minister in just a moment with an important message for anyone getting behind the wheel this summer. But first, let's check the headlines with the Listener News team.
Good morning, I'm James Lake. 3/4 of Australians say they want tougher gun laws, according to this week's Resolve poll. The push comes as National Cabinet fast-tracks a firearms register and tighter licence rules following the attack at Bondi. Support for reform cuts across party lines as well, with more than 80% backing limits on gun numbers and high-powered weapons. Britain could soon follow Australia in banning social media for kids under 16. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is weighing up an Australian-style law which blocks under 16 from accessing apps like TikTok, Instagram and Snapchat. Origin Energy's in hot water, accused of overcharging thousands of customers by $2.5 million. In a case which has made its way to the federal court, the energy regulator says more than 3,400 people were billed after closing accounts or paying in full. And pet owners are being warned to keep Christmas treats away from furry friends, with research showing 1 in 5 households are likely to share festive treats containing alcohol, caffeine and onion.
Thanks to the Listener Newsroom for those headlines. Now it's time for our deep dive in how to stay safe on our roads this summer. In 2025, our road toll was one of the highest in more than a decade, with drivers on country and regional roads most at risk. In this special episode, we're joined by the New South Wales Roads Minister, Jenny Aitchison, who explains why the death toll is so high and her important message for every driver this holiday season. Minister, thanks so much for joining us on this really important topic. Why should we care about the road toll?
Look, we have to care about it because every life matters and the number of deaths on our roads is really unacceptable, and we want it to be zero. And of course, behind those deaths, there are families that are left with lifelong trauma and grief, and for people who are involved in those crashes, often guilt. And then, of course, there's a whole huge number behind that of people who are left with lifelong serious injuries that change the way they live.
Minister, latest stats show the national road toll exceeded 11,000 over the past decade. That is 11,000. Now, that's 11,000 lives lost, but we all know that one life, that one person, has a number of loved ones, friends, family. And it's not just the people killed in the road toll, it's the lifelong injuries that are also suffered by so many.
Yeah, look, certainly it is. And if you were looking at the serious injuries, you could multiply that number out by probably 7 or 8 in terms of the impact it's had on people. The Road Trauma Support Group, for example, is a group that's been set up in recent years in New South Wales to support families and advocate for change. And they do a really important job in helping people who have lost someone tell their story, get access to services like counselling and even sometimes financial assistance, and to let them go through the court process, because people don't kind of think about it. They think there was a crash and someone died or someone was seriously injured and that's the end of it. But there's years and years and decades often of the impacts that are felt by the family or the survivors of that crash.
We all know about the danger of speeding. We know the importance of wearing seatbelts. We know the dangers of driving irresponsibly on the road or being distracted, especially with mobile phones. Why is the road toll still so high?
Look, I think we know those things on a theoretical level, but we tend to think about it as being someone else's problem. We're outraged when we see someone speeding or driving dangerously, not paying attention, but we kind of forget, I think, there's moments that we do that ourselves when we get behind the wheel, and that getting behind the wheel of a car or getting on a motorbike is a really important thing, and it's become such a commonplace, got to get in the car, go to work, go to school, go to a medical appointment. We don't really give it the weight of importance in how we attend to it. And that's, I think, part of the problem.
I've seen a dramatic increase. I drive regularly on country roads, and we know the road toll is a huge issue in regional and rural parts of Australia. There seems to be an increase in really dangerous behaviour on the road, overtaking on double lines, going around blind corners. Do you think COVID had anything to do with this increase in dangerous behaviour?
Look, I think there's certainly an element within the community that doesn't like to be told what to do anymore and think that those people, they know best about how to go ahead. But I think also in regional New South Wales, we've also seen an increase in population after COVID, a lot more people living in the regions with teleworking and other opportunities there enabling that. And probably road networks in those areas are sometimes built for much smaller populations, so there's more congestion. People get frustrated because they've never had to deal with congestion before. And where we used to see the country or regional road toll being really around that run-off road, fatigue, long distances, we are seeing it now move towards higher built-up areas in regional New South Wales. So regional cities are a real key driver of that, and congestion is a factor.
Minister, we've seen the road toll still start to increase in many circumstances. It is still too high. I know the government's adamant about having zero as the number of people killed on our roads. Why do we still have a road toll if we fine people for speeding? They're double demerit points. We have speed cameras, we have seatbelt cameras. One may say that is revenue raising and it's actually not helping to bring the road toll down. What would you say to that?
Look, every dollar that's raised from enforcement technology goes towards improving our roads, better safety programs, a whole lot of work that's being done by the Centre for Road Safety. So that's actually legislated that it doesn't go into consolidated revenue. It has to be spent on reducing deaths on our roads. Some of that funding is for what we call Towards Zero Safer Roads program. So that's widening the road network, so making sure that there's more centreline barriers, wider centre lines, the shoulders of the roads are bigger, the rumble strips are there so that people are actually getting more warnings. And if they do have a run-off road, they're more likely to be brought back in. The other thing that gets funded through this is things like testing of vehicles to make sure that they are as safe as they can be, and looking at the new technology and things like autonomous vehicles where you've got lane guards so that they don't let you go off the line, or they have automatic braking. So a whole lot of different pieces of work being done there.
Also, in regards to double demerits, why do you think it's necessary to double the fine for people over that Christmas New Year period? Is it because there are more cars on the road and it's that difficult time of year where people are driving long distances and they're exhausted?
Yeah, look, I think that is a big factor on it. The exhaustion, the fact that people have been partying, might still be over the limit when they get up the next morning and don't think about that, or taking alcohol, other drugs, it is a real challenge, and just the sheer number of people using the roads, and also on unfamiliar roads, because you're going to see people that you don't normally see through the year, so you're not used to driving on that road. When we talk to the experts, they tell us that double demerits have actually saved lives, and while the number of deaths on our roads over the holiday period is horrific, and it's awful when people aren't at the Christmas table or aren't, sitting down with their family through that holiday period, it would be much worse if we didn't have that element of it.
How important do you think it is to do driver education for learner drivers and also P-plate drivers, and for the fact that to be funded by the state or federal government? Because a lot of people say when they send their 17-year-old out to get their Ps that they're still not experienced, especially if something goes wrong.
Yeah, look, that's why we have got an investment with the New South Wales government of things like the Driver Learning Access Program, so DLAP. That's something that runs in a lot of areas where it has someone funded to assist a young driver with learning, because we know sometimes mum and dad might not be the best people to learn from. And also there's organisations like NRMA and others that provide learning which can take some of the hours out of the graduated licensing scheme, so that there's a benefit for the learner because they're getting more quality hours, so they don't have to do as many of them. So we do try to adjust that. This year when we had the motorcycle round table, because we'd seen an increase in the motorcycle deaths, we said, okay, what can we do here? And the statistics were really clear that novice riders, at every point they had an increase in their rights on the road as motorcyclists were at greater risk. So that's why we're ramping up that particular program. So that's never had that review for like 20 years. So we'll be increasing training opportunities in small groups online and really giving motorcycle drivers more support. The other thing is the practical support. So we are mandating gloves now for learner novice riders because we know that, a lot of young people want to save money, get on a motorbike, go to work, but if they lose the use of their hands because they've had a crash, then that's not a great outcome. So we know that's one way we can really assist in that. But again, like seatbelts on a motorbike, helmets are really important. We see 1 in 10 crashes. They're not wearing them, which is really quite
catastrophic.
A shame. Yeah.
Minister, in regards to this proposal to decrease the speed limit on some country roads from 100 down to 80, there's been a lot of local residents in regional areas very concerned about this, saying that it will actually affect their businesses. What is the reasoning behind that?
So it's a really good question, that one, because I know there was a report that was done, I think, under the previous federal government, and it was in response to the road deaths. And so they said, let's trial this. And the current federal government has had to respond to that report. Now, we as New South Wales have said we don't support blanket reductions in speed zones. If you've got a situation where the speed zone doesn't match the feel of the road, you've got much less compliance, and then you end up with a disparity between what people are driving at and what, who are complying, and then people who are driving of what they think it should be like. So that creates then a tension in there. So we don't want to have blanket speed zones. We want it to be that if that's a road that deserves that designation of 60, 80, 100, 110, whatever it is, that's what we should be doing. Where the infrastructure doesn't support the higher speed, that's where the OSRAP data came in, and that's where we actually have been very transparent, the first jurisdiction to do that, to star rate our roads on safety and to really give people better information so that when we're doing funding decisions, it's much more transparent. It's not based on whose electorate you're in, but it's based on what's the safety needs of your road network.
Minister, we know New South Wales police right across the country do incredible work, especially during the Christmas New Year period on our roads. What about the proposal? I heard something overseas recently about using drones and new technology to monitor country roads in particular, because many experts would say speed is certainly a factor, but irresponsible, dangerous behaviour on the roads is incredibly dangerous. What about using new technology and monitoring that?
Look, we already are using some new technology. So we're using the, autonomous testing for mobile phone use and seatbelts. So that's where it can look inside the car and actually see what's happening in terms of that. But also with drones, we are using that for traffic congestion and for traffic incidents. So we had first in the nation with the drone in a box, which is where we can control our drones for Transport for New South Wales remotely. So you don't need to have somebody within line of sight of the drone, because that's one of the challenges. You can have a drone where it needs to be, but you've got to have the drone operator there under the formal rules. We can now control those drones from anywhere in the state remotely, which is really good. In terms of enforcement, it's something that, people will look at in make decisions about it. But we do have a really strong network of fixed speed cameras. And in terms of mobile speed cameras, we have also increased the number of sites that can be used for that kind of enforcement. So, and we've really lent into the idea of hearing from the community. So, if you see a particular area in your local neighbourhood where people are speeding all the time, you might say, okay, I want to do it. You can go online and actually nominate that area for a mobile speed camera. Right. Doesn't mean it'll be there all the time, but it does mean that it will be there at some point if it is successful through the nomination process.
Minister, this week, double demerits come into force. So we know it's the Christmas New Year period. A lot of people are travelling long distances. They could be very tired. What would your message be to anyone taking to the roads this Christmas New Year period?
Look, I think the really number one thing is it's not the egregious, terrifying acts that are always the ones that are going to cause the fatality. People have to really think about it. Just a couple of kilometres over the speed limit, a couple of kilometres too fast around a curve, which could even be within the speed limit, but just faster than that curve needs to be, can be something which can cause a fatal crash and mean that you or your family members or someone else's family members doesn't make it home. So really it's about personal responsibility. That's the thing that we have the most control over here. And if one person can just have that thought and it saves a life, then that's a great outcome, you know. And I think the other thing is talking to young people in our families. They're not listening to,
Parents,
exactly. But maybe, a trusted friend and someone can say, hey, look, just make sure you've got a plan B if you're going out. And also having a conversation with our young people about things like alcohol, drug use and the impact on driving, I think is really important. I remember when my son went out overnight when he'd got his licence and he had a beer and I just went, you what? And he says, but I thought it was okay because I complained. It's like, don't do it. You're not experienced enough to do that at all. And it's he listened and that's good. But I just think I probably, kick myself that I should have said that, yes, you're allowed under the law once you've got your full licence, but don't do it because why take that extra risk? And I think that's something we need to all look at. How do we have that, engagement with people to change their minds about their own behaviour?
Because a split-second decision can change someone's life forever.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much, Minister.
Thank you.
That was New South Wales Roads Minister Jenny Aitchison. Before you go, we'd love it if you could share this episode with someone that may find it interesting. And you can also check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Natasha Belling. See you next time.